بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. السلام عليكم. السلام عليكم. I am very happy tonight because of three reasons. Number one, we are speaking about Islamic art, the Islamic garden, art, science, or faith. Not many people speak about art, especially among the Muslims, whether here or in the Muslim countries. So this is really a special emphasis, and we are grateful that we will talk about this and be educated. The other thing is, I'm very happy because we have the right person, the specialist, Dr. Safei-Eldin really, to address this topic and enlighten us and teach us. And I am expecting that we learn a lot from this scholar in this field. Professor Safei-Eldin Hamid is scholar and the professor of architecture, environmental planning, and international development. He taught at several universities such as University of Maryland, Virginia Tech, and Texas Tech University. He served as an international consultant for the World Bank, State Department, the Agency for International Development, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, I like to eat fish, okay, and the Environmental Protection Agency, mashallah. He wrote several books and published many articles on the topic of Islamic art and civilization. Professor Hamid lectured widely around the world, including Harvard University, Stanford University, and Oxford University. And now we add International Institute of Islamic Thought, inshallah. So we are all ears and minds and hearts listening to Professor Hamid. Barakallah. Fadal.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody, and I am very pleased and thank everybody here for attending and for being here to share knowledge together about a topic which is very dear to me, very dear to my heart, and you will hear why. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي امري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Before we talk about something, I would like to share with you a very short clip about the topic of Islamic garden, but it's a short video which will put you at least in the mood and the experience of a visitor of this. I was shocked. I could not believe it. I really couldn't believe it. 14 centuries after Islam, and this art is admired by so many people, and yet our scholars are not writing about it. Jannatul Uyun, of course, is a verse from the Quran. Jannat is the paradises, and the Uyun are the springs. So I'll pass it so everybody can look at it. I'm not saying that to brag, but to see that I'm still in a shock. I am truly in a shock. I couldn't believe it. Using distinct design elements. There are also, when you study what happened during the climax of the Islamic civilization, you will see elements, and we'll talk about those things. So, designed with intentions, applying ideology, and it's rooted in the faith, and using distinct design elements. But the question, I'm not going to answer the question which was put as a title. Is it an art? Is it a science? Or it is a theology, part of the religious studies? Why do we study it? See, there is a big problem between appreciating music. We all listen to music and appreciate it. But if we ask any one of us, could you play Most of us don't. Could you write music? Most of us don't. And of course, being a professor, it was my duty to teach the students how to think, how to go through the process. How did these people ended up with these magnificent, beautiful things? So, to study all these examples throughout the history, it really gives some creative, inspiring ideas. If you, for instance, haven't seen any mosques, and you have the money to build a mosque, you don't know where to start. But when you see so many mosques, that gives you a little bit of hints. Just like when you read a poem or read a good writing or an essay or something. The problem with all these Western written books was that the West didn't learn Islam. Of course, there are Christians and Jews and all others. So they emphasized what they saw. What they saw and impressed them was these geometric patterns, these elaborate water cascades and fountains. They were stunned by all these things. So all their books, when you see it in English or French or whatever, they are talking about this senses, the physical. This colorful planting and variety. But they don't know what's behind it. And that's why when I talked in the Smithsonian or whatever, I opened new doors for all of those people. They never realized that there was many dimensions which were rooted in our faith. They didn't know, and they have every excuse for that. But what is our excuse, Muslims? The philosophy. Islam is a philosophy. Islam has the spirit of Islam is different, and that's why there is a poetry in like today when we were praying upstairs the Maghrib. The person, and I want to I forgot to say that, but I would like to recognize Mr. Sabr Kilani because he helped me a great deal in terms of the library resources. I didn't catch up with all the library advancement in the last 2 or 3 years, and I came once here and he provided me with some of the attempts. There are some baby attempts, and it's good that it is at least in the library here. Many of them are in Arabic, many of them in English, but they're good. So thank you, sir, for helping me. But those baby steps are not enough, really. They are not enough to tell the total story or the comprehensive story about the third question. Of course, you have there: what are the primary factors that influence the design of the historical Islamic gardens? I mean, it didn't start from scratch, of course. And when you think of it, what in the world these people came from? The desert, the arid deserts of Arabia, and the very narrow fauna palette, or the trees, the varieties are very small, maybe palm tree here and so on. How did all of these people ended up to show this kind of richness in design as we saw it in the 14th century? So within those 7 centuries, what happened to make someone who even didn't see this kind of vegetation and earlier civilization see the difference between someone who has an inferiority complex and someone who is confident? The Muslims, the early Muslims, were confident about their about their ideas, about their Quran and Sunnah, and so they didn't find any hesitation to borrow from east or west. The genius of water engineering, which was in the Persian Empire, were borrowed without any hesitation or shyness. Why? I mean, it became part of the Muslim Ummah. So you take the ingenuity of Egyptians in terms of planting. They are two good farmers. And Egypt used to be almost like an oasis. They took this also and they sort of absorbed it, produced it. Even the Byzantine architecture, the ability of the colors and so on of other civilization, there was no hesitation. But later on, out of all of that came a new art, which we really today, anyone in the world can see, say, well, yeah, that's an Islamic art, because the advancements were beyond. I'm sorry. For some reason,
You're going back.
moving forward. Oh, the Holy Quran. How many of you knows or can imagine that 164 times in the verses of the Quran the gardens were mentioned,
You mean with Jannah or
Jannah and so on, and with elaborate descriptions. You know, I have been a designer all my life, of course, so whether it's architecture or gardens and city planning and so on. And I can tell you that when I start to examine all this literature and came up with these conclusions, I was amazed, because I can see now that the Quran was giving clues, giving you some, you as a designer, instead of starting from a scratch, when he tells you, for instance, Surah Al-Rahman, Aynan, I'm not a hafiz, but it gives you the physical and the organization and the geometry and the elements and the colors and so on. So you are, Surah Al-Rahman in particular, there's a lot of it. And of course, the many hadith, and we will come to that as well, you will see can influence anyone who is thinking about Islamic gardens and the arid environment. These people came from the desert, and that stayed with them in their blood and culture. Even when they went all the way to Spain or all the way to India, where there is ample water, but they were very careful and economic when they are using water. Because as a Muslim, you are not supposed to be extravagant or wasteful and so on. So these are always resources, and we will see more. That the two kinds of gardens, one of them is called as-sahn, Hadiqat as-sahn, or the courtyard, which is the majority of the Islamic gardens, were actually a response to the arid environment, because you use the different elements of your house to protect your favorite outdoor. So it's not only giving you privacy, but it gives you protection from the dust and the sandstorms and and the wind or the noise, everything. So the arid environment was always in their mind. And this is again, if you study or you teach like what I did, the history of gardens of the world. And of course, there are many civilizations who had their own, from the hanging gardens
Way
of
to the
Babylon,
modern.
all. You will find there is something about the Islamic gardens that it addressed so many aspects of the human being. It's not only the physical that gives you a cool place or a adequate space or what, no, but there is a spirituality considered and all the other senses. As one of the poet of the Middle East, he said, my garden, my court garden is a place for perfumes. You know, and whether you put a jasmine or you put any other plant which will provide some nice smell, it attracts one of your senses. If you are selecting a particular tree to attract birds, it is to enjoy the sounds of birds and so on. This kind of multi-dimensional were not among the Europeans. This kind of, because a designer has to be thinking on many tracks. This was not, and that's why even the books, the Western books until today, is only narrowed to, as I said, to the physical. But the spiritual, the sensational, this need a different depth from a much more knowledgeable person. In Islam, which very few people today are taught among Muslims, because we are still thinking about the past, how, as I said, the villages, the teacher in the village, in a small village in Upper Egypt, who have a stick, and what he cares about is that every kid will memorize the Quran instead of everyone understands the Quran.
Yeah.
Part of our duty as a Muslim is to be Khalifatullah. Al-Istikhlaf means Allah wants us as a human being to be trustee, steward, the stewardship on nature. This has been an advanced idea. You can see it if you look for it in the Quran and in the Sunnah. Books have been written about that. So protecting the flora and the fauna and even the human ecosystem is part of the objectives of an Islamic garden. You think about it when you are, now we are talking about the pollution. Look at the terrible pollution in the Muslim world. Because the kids are not taught that you as a human being, you as a Muslim, are the vice regent, the trustee, the steward on earth. Allah gave all these blessings, and you have been assigned. And many of course ayat is written about that. And then settling the earth. In Surah Hud, استعمار الأرض، عمارة الأرض. هو أنشأكم من الأرض واستعمركم فيها. Surah Hud. Yani it's so important that we are, as a human being, doing عمارة الأرض means the development. Now you take a piece of land and you are making it better. What are the elements, the typical elements? The typical elements are very well known. As I said, most, not all, because there are other kinds. For instance, Taj Mahal, as a garden, it's called the Bustan. The Bustan is that the main building in the middle, and there are larger acres of gardens, of planted and water and so on. But the majority are courtyards, حديقة الصح. The water feature, even among the poor. Of course, we saw the palace of Alhambra, but that was even the poorest person will have maybe a well, maybe a very small sabil, or the vocabulary of water features were so many. Could be a fountain, it could be a cascading fountain, it could be a jet fountain, it could be just a nice well where people can do wudu, and of course the trees. I want to say something about trees in particular. Trees were, of course, it's a science. Plants, or the botany of the flora. The kings and the princes and all of the royals were actually so fond of learning, to the point that Emperor Babur in India, one of the famous emperors who also did a great deal of gardens and palaces and so on, he was actually a scholar of plant ecology. And they were finding it so necessary to know the taxonomy of plants, the different kinds, and they were caring about importing it if they don't have it in the local markets, to the point, and this is a very interesting thing I found, that in Andalusia, in Spain, Muslim Spain, they used to say someone who will draw very well. And as a part of preparing this book about plants, to draw the leaves, to draw the flowers, to draw the fruits, and then he has cups of different colors, and make sure that, because they didn't have, of course, cameras and so on, so they were going through a lot of efforts to know their plants and know it scientifically in all aspects of science, as well as of the visual of it, and which one can will bring a nice smell, which one will attract birds, which one will need less water or more water, which one will give more shade, which one, and so on. And the same with flowers. I look around me and I ask, how many among our young people, young men and women, or not so young Muslims, who have this as a hobby? And why not? Because it was not part. It slowly became a specialization for an agricultural engineer, or a trade for someone who is a botanist or something. While this was a culture among the average person. Something have been lost over the years, and we have to do something about bringing it back. Then calligraphy on walls. There are walls, and as you saw it in the Palace of Alhambra, every empty space or empty wall is really an opportunity for a calligrapher or an artist to do something beautiful. And they used to put verses of the Quran, a part of a hadith. So it adds a different dimension. The wisdom, every verse of the Quran or every hadith selected, or maybe even a piece of a poem, it goes to another dimension in the person visiting. You see Qasr al-Hamra, the palace of Alhambra. The flag of this dynasty was وَلَا غَالِبَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ وَلَا غَالِبَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ, and it is repeated and repeat it. And all over the place in such a geometric, not redundancy, but repetition in such a beautiful way to add the sense of infinity. You know, we know that human beings go generation after generation, and we always think what happened when the Prophet ﷺ arrived. In other words, we have a kind of horizon, time horizon. We are not just living the day, and this is translated into this kind of geometric patterns. Look at this. This is, we call it Manzil al-Sahimi. It's a family called al-Sahimi from the 17th century or so in Cairo, in the old Cairo place. Look, it's a small place. It is not a very luxurious place, but it gives the people a place for fresh air, a place for quietness from the noise of the street or the pollution from the street. It gives them the privacy of where the ladies and the girls and so on can have can be cooking or can be socializing, and also having the hobby of planting and having the shadow. Plus, it's a lesson of thermodynamics. Of course, we are so westernized now that nobody think, and many of us are wealthy enough to build their own homes and they can have it a courtyard, but nobody think because it has not been told. Something was taken from the memory of Muslims. The beauty of the courtyard garden and the possibility. I said for people who are maybe mechanical engineers or electrical, the cold, suppose we are in a hot summer day, the cold air sinks down to the courtyard and start to penetrate through all these doors to the different parts of the house. And it keeps like that. The hot air goes up, the cold air goes down, keeps that courtyard always nice and cool, some breeze, and it penetrates through the whole house. We go back to the Court of Lions, one of the many courts in Al-Habra. Look at the simplicity of it, and look at the use of water. We will talk about that at length now. It can be like in the Court of Myrtle, which has a big tower. You can put maybe 1 inch of water in a pool, and you will see that magic of reflection. You see the building twice, once high in the sky, the other right in the water, and that to emphasize architectural elements. Look at the design. These things are not done random. These are not done by chance. These are done by, like the Taj Mahal. This is done by intention. This is someone who is creative, who learned from the lessons of the past. When you put a small cascading fountain like that, what do you add? You add dynamic quality. You enter this is very different from the previous court, which is the Court of Myrtle, which is very quiet and calm, serene. No, this one, there is sound of water. There is the movement of water going through these canals, which goes to the rooms and to the halls, and people use it for wudu. Also to mask outdoor noise. We are using the same thing now in malls. When you go to malls, there is something called, architects use it, you call it the white noise. You don't want to hear all the noise of the people, so you have a fountain or a cascading water or whatever. That gives what we call it the white noise. And these people discovered it in the 14th century, used it skillfully. And no wonder 2 million people go and visit every year to provide pleasing sounds. The sounds, of course, of trickling water is beautiful, and it is, to many people, very calming, very relaxing, but not wasted. All of this are collected through these canals, and that's why I said the ingenuity of the Persian Empire were borrowed from first time and used and applied throughout the Muslim nations. Irrigation plants were used everywhere, even inside palaces. Think of a very dry summer day and what would be, especially the jets we saw, the sprinkling jets. What can that do to the atmosphere? Especially if it is very dry, the moisturizing the dry climate, or soothing the dusty environment if it is dusty. So we are talking about very sophisticated, not mechanical, no, very well thought ideas. How has the Islamic faith influenced the design works of its society? This is I consider this part is coming on, is humbly the biggest important addition to the previous knowledge we had. If you study all over, you will find the balance between physical and metaphysical. Truly, it is not a hegemonistic or exercise of beauty of colors and forms and all those kind of terminology we know in design. No, there is something metaphysical, and it was very well thought out. You will feel it when you go through, and that's why we like old cities, all the Islamic cities, and all the Islamic palaces, and all. It was not mechanical, and I'm not against technology, but you know, there is some kind of lack of warmth in the modern. They call it modern architecture and modern and so on. There is, here you can feel the human touch. Also, we will notice that the gardens of the Muslims, of the Islamic civilization, were multiple use. Look around you in America. Most 99% of the gardens are for show. Nice color, nice forms, variety of plants. No. In a garden, in that times, including Alhambra, including the palaces, there is a place to recreate physically, walk or do exercise or whatever. There is a place to actually produce fruits. You will find in the middle of the palace orange trees in an orchard, or palm trees to produce, and so on. And the diversity, we will talk about that as well. You don't see, like the Roman Empire, for instance. The Roman Empire took their buildings and their architecture and all over the world repeated it, regardless whether you are in Rome or in Tunis or down in Egypt, whatever. Everywhere it's the same Roman architecture. Even we here in Washington, D.C., we followed the Roman architecture, as you can see all over the place, from the White House do it. That's not the case in Islamic design. Islamic design was very sensitive to regional variations. You'll find a mosque in West Africa very different from the one in Cairo, Egypt, in Baghdad, Iraq, in Damascus. There is a kind, or you go to Samarkand and so on. Beauty. This is the lost part of our civilization. This is the lost in our Islamic personality or something. Unfortunately, when Brother Hisham was saying something about art, which many Muslims don't know much or don't talk much about it, it was like someone was putting a dagger in my heart. The people who produced this best, look at everything was beautified, even the copy of the Quran. Even the copy, look at the different 10 or whatever fonts and styles, the Kufi, the Nasakh, a lot of them, and everyone it was a competition, day and night, in beauty, in beautifying. The saddle of a person who was riding a horse or a camel was a piece of art. The lantern or the lamp in the mosque, everything, the art was not in museums like the Western. No, it was part of your daily life. The scarves of a woman, now, I hate to say it is, we live in a sea of ugliness when you go and visit these Muslim countries today. And I start with my own country, as if the word beauty is not there. Moderation, nothing was done extravagantly. And if you travel through Europe and you see the Italian Renaissance gardens or the French Renaissance gardens and compare them to the Islam, you will see what does it mean that we were خلقناكم أمة وسطا, that we were always have to be modest, not extravagant, not wasteful, not showy, but beauty is something else. And contextualism means addressing, I'll go a little bit faster, addressing the surrounding, and we'll go, I mean, look, there was a competition among people of who will decorate the Mus'haf better, highlighting the name of the title of the surah, or the outside the cover, and the calligraphy itself. Let me ask you this: how many people are competing today in terms of who is better calligrapher than others? I don't see any. The best calligrapher in the world is an American convert, Muhammad Zakaria, who lives here in Virginia. But among the Muslims, we don't see people taking pride. You know, being in America that long, and I have taught thousands of students, I see here among the American women, young women, who always have a better lettering than the boys. Well, it's nice. It's nice that they compete among. I wish the Muslims would start to compete among who have a better Arabic calligraphy than the others. This is part of the identity, that you are proud that you know Arabic, that you're. God has created the heavens and the earth, and He sends you down rain from the sky. You with the because a grow well planted orchard full of beauty and delight. I mean, this is the way Allah describes in the Quran. أمن خلق السماوات والأرض وأنزل لكم من السماء ماء فأنبتنا به حدائق ذات بهجة. Look at the emphasis here is about beauty. And that is a topic is not mentioned today in our conversations or our education. That's Surah Al-Naml. That is the crux of the matter. We don't teach enough our young kids this hadith. إن الله جميل يحب الجمال. When you hear that, إن الله جميل يحب الجمال, every act in life you have to be guided with, is it a beautiful act? Whether the way you talk, the way you decorate, the way you write. I stumbled on this. I have not been taught as a child this. How many of you have been taught this hadith? إن الله جميل يحب الجمال. What? I wish the two sheikhs were here to say, did I prove my hypothesis? Our Islamic so-called education, الثقافة الإسلامية, don't they call it that? The التربية الإسلامية is incomplete. Because beauty affects the whole world. The whole world. I want to, we talked about balancing the physical and metaphysical. This is actually rooted, sorry. This is rooted in the concept of unity as a Muslim. And this is very unique. We have to know what is unique about us. As a Muslim, you always know that there are the seen and there is the unseen. This is very unique. Talk to the other Americans, and that is not, they think that you are crazy because you are talking about that there is unseen. All of these things made it very obvious for the designer to think about that there is another dimension, not only the physical. I'm going through here, look at the beauty of reflection. Less than an inch of water made this kind of magic, serenity of the reflection of the big tower. Multiple use, as I said, the garden could be recreational. In the meantime, it has an oasis for the birds to come and eat from the fruits, but still it's beautiful. It emphasizes the diversity, science and art, natural and urban, tangible and symbolic, light and shadow. These things goes in the mind of the designer. So you end up with this kind of beautiful things. Think of it after 4 centuries, 5 centuries, 6 centuries. And then also many scholars, many Western scholars, they could not understand Taj Mahal in India in the 16th century and Al-Hamra in the 14th century in Europe. But you enter the place here and you enter the place here and you feel that there is something related. What is that something related? The spirit of Islam. All these values and principles we have been talking about. The beauty. Art is integrated in life, not in museums or only for the rich or for the spoiled, as some of the Arab, if you go to the College of Art, you are a lost cause. You are not a Muslim. But here it was calculated. If you enter Alhambra, you see a very austere, very rough exterior. But you enter, you see all this ornamentation and beauty. And that tells you something. As a Muslim, the richness is not in your appearance. Otherwise it becomes arrogance. But the richness is inside, in the mind, in the soul, in the heart. This has to be taught to the kids. It is not how many clothing you have or how expensive. Beauty without arrogance. And it was reflected in the architecture and the designs. Inner richness, but humble exterior. We have indeed created you a middle nation, and this is a moderation. You, as I said, it's not contextualism. This is a lecture by itself, but I tell you, respect of God-made environment. When you deal with nature, you have to respect the creation of Allah in all those plants, birds, animals, fish, and so on. But if you deal with only urban environment, you have to respect your neighbors. And we know what Islam talked about. And there was, of course, an office called the Muhtasib to deal with all of these things. I'm going to go quickly here to ask the question. We know, of course, that it was in Iran, in Turkey, in India, Pakistan. Kashmir was a climax, of course. Uzbekistan was another beauty. But Spain was a climax. Taj Mahal was a climax. Now, probably, I will leave this and I will ask you the question. Why some scholars consider the Islamic garden an art? And, why do some scholars consider the Islamic garden as a science or as a theological study? If I wish, I pray that from my long discussion here, that you remember those things. Those are really has to be part of the psyche or the mentality or the culture of Islam, of every Muslim, in every aspect of his life. Inna Allah jamilun yuhibbul jamal. Allah is beautiful and He loves beauty. This is number one. Hadith. Another hadith, احتكوا بالأرض فإنها بكم مطهرة. The fact of gardening, and you see, my wife is a very good gardener, a vegetable gardener, and she puts a lot of efforts and a lot of hours and a lot of tasks throughout the spring and the summer and so on. But here it's in other words, احتكوا بالأرض means stay in touch with earth and it will be very grateful to you. That's a hadith. So we are talking about Islamic and the Prophet's guidance, and we don't teach that to our kids. And in the Quran, إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. And I challenge anybody to see any Islamic Sunday school or what they call Islamic schools who are teaching this fact of that Allah in the Quran say, I am going to send human beings to this earth to become trustee, steward. The word which the whole world now took from Islam. But the Muslims themselves don't know it. They don't use it. It's not part of them now. You have to be specialized with a PhD to get to this point. إِنِّي جَعْلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. How many of us teach their kids that we are stewards on the earth?
Well, actually, Adams Center has a community service day that through their Sunday school for many years, they've had that community service day and talked about how Muslims are responsible and so that happens annually.
Oh, I am so pleased. I'm going to go to Adam Center now
Okay.
to see that day.
Um,
Is that on the Earth Day?
it's not, it doesn't always align with Earth Day, but typically happens around May if there is.
And they teach the ayahs and the verses from the Quran and the Hadith and so on?
It's in the middle school curriculum for Sunday school, actually, for Sunday school.
For Sunday school.
Mhm.
Oh,
Middle
good.
school, seventh.
I learned something today. Okay, I want to finish here with this. Ian McCarg was one of the leaders of the environmental movement in the 1960s and 70s. He was the head of department in University of Pennsylvania. And he wrote, the Muslim emphasized the injunction to dress the garden and keep it man the steward. Paradise could be created on earth by wise men and realized by artists. So we need science, we need art, and also we need to teach that the principles of Islam include caring about the earth, and that gardens are not for kings and queens and princes and princesses. This is part of our belief as Muslims and our duty on earth. This is part of many things which I would love one of those days to see more becoming a mainstream culture among the Muslim generation, the young generation, to really to be deserving that yes, these people were our grandparents. قولوا قولي هذا. Thank you very much for being a good listeners.